Hi, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and program our base pin 2 part now. If you remembered programming base pin 1, it's going to be very similar, a lot of the same features. We're going to use that same tool library that I had you download in base pin 1. I am going to show you a few different techniques on this one using some of the different can cycle tool paths, which from the programmer's perspective is very similar to the regular cycles. Just in the posted G code, you're going to have a different kind of code that's a little more machine friendly, makes your programs not quite as long, a little easier to edit at the machine if you want to do that. So I'll be going through those steps this time, but overall very similar to base pin 1. So to get started, we always have to have our plus D plus Z plane set anytime we're going to go and work on the lathe. So I'm going to go to my planes, plus D plus Z. I've created that plane right at the front right side center of my part. I want to make sure it's active, so my work coordinate system construction plane tool plane, I have everything active on it, and then from there I'll go right to machine, lathe, and then select whatever lathe you're going to be using in your shop or in your classroom. We're just going to go ahead and use the lathe default on this video. So with that created, now I can come down here to toolpath and I can go ahead and set up my stock. So in my stock setup, I'm going to go to properties, and the diameter of my stock that we're going to be using is 1-inch aluminum, and we're going to put in a length of 4 inches. Green check that, and now to set up our chuck jaws, we're going to go to properties, parameters. So I want my jaws to be open to a 1-inch diameter, and they're going to be at the minus 3.5 inch, and that's so I'm planning on sticking my stock 3.5 inches out of the chuck jaws. So I'm going to green check that, and then you'll see here that here's my chuck jaws, my bar stock sticking out, and then here's my part at the end. So we are ready to start programming. So the first thing that we always do when programming is face off the front of the part. So if I go to my face parameters, I'm not going to use any of these Mastercam default tools. I'm going to use tools from my tool library. So select tool from library, go up to this folder, and then you want to navigate to wherever you put the tool library. I keep mine in my C drive. So Mastercam lathe tools open, and then here's the actual 10 tools that I have set up in my machine. So tool 1, my CNMG is what I typically use for facing. Green check that. I'm only taking one pass, so I'm not roughing, so I'm going to slow it down to my 5,000 inches per rev feed rate, maximum RPM of 3,500. I shouldn't have to change anything in my face parameters. It defaults to using the stock, which I have the stock set right at 0 and 0,000 stock allowance. So hit green check, and you can see it made that nice facing pass. Now we're going to go ahead and do our roughing. And like before, we're only going to cut the front half of this part until the thread is done. I don't want to weaken any of the stability before I'm done threading. So I'm going to cut that front half of the part. Before I do that, I always like to add in my extra line that goes above the stock to make sure that we rough all this stock out. Even though there's not much here to rough, I like to form the habit of always adding in that extra line. So there's my extra line. Now, when I rough this time, I'm going to be using the can cycle roughing. So you see it down here, and it's got these little arrows in it. That just means it's going to post out the can cycle for the machine as opposed to the line to line to line to line cycle. So, or just straight point to point G code. It makes the program a little shorter and easier to edit at the machine. So we'll use the can cycle roughing in this video. You're still going to select the chain just like you normally do, first and last point. Everything connects good. I've got my tool set. 10,000 inches per rev is good. 3,500 for my maximum spindle RPM. Now my can roughing parameters, it looks a little different. For the most part, everything is the same. It's leaving stock allowance here. If I look down in my can cycle settings, this is what it shows it's going to post out. It's going to post out a G71 cycle. Now in this G71 cycle, it's got a P and a Q line. And once you look at the G code, you'll see the P line and the Q line. Those are the actual start and end points of the cycle. And then it'll fill out the number of passes and everything in this command line. It keeps the program a lot smaller and less cluttered. And if you understand how this G code works, it's very easy to edit. So I'm going to leave everything like that the same, except for it's got a U of 0.1 here is what it's showing. That's actually this depth of cut here, and I'm going to change that to 50 thousandths. So we're going to green check that, and you can see that it made this nice roughing cycle. Now, if I use the finished can cycle, it doesn't actually have me select a chain, because in these can finish parameters, it's going to look at a roughing cycle and just add it to the tail end of that. So we're going to use the same tool. We're going to change our inches per rev to 5 thousandths for finishing, and 3500 max spindle speed. So you can see here in the finish parameters, it's going to look at lathe canned rough and use that, which is the previous tool path, as its chain. So I hit green check, and it just creates the program without having to go in and chain it. So with our facing, roughing, and finishing created, now we're going to go ahead and put in the relief groove. So I'm going to turn these tool paths off. Now my relief groove, I'm going to go ahead and use the standard grooving. I'm going to use a chain, and I'm going to select from this start of the chain over to the end. It selects the entire groove. Green check that. In my tool library, I like to use my parting tool for this groove, which is tool 4. So select tool from library. Tool 404 is my parting tool or my groove tool. Green check that. All my parameters are pretty good except for my max spindle speed. This is going to go ahead and take a rough and a finish, which will be fine. I'm going to let it just go to its default values, and you can see that it cuts a nice little groove in here. With the groove done, I'm ready to go ahead and cut these threads. So we're going to go ahead and use our threading tool path. In my custom library, I believe it's tool 6 is my threading tool. We'll green check that. And under the thread shape parameters, we're going to go to the table, and we're going to select our 3/8/16 thread out of here. So 375 major diameter, 16 threads per inch. Green check, and that fills in my feeds and speeds along with all the information on the threads, the major and the minor diameter. The one thing I need to change is my end position, and that's how long this thread is. So we only want it to be 350 thousandths on this one. And then my thread cut parameters, I'm going to change it to 10 passes as opposed to 5. And you can see it cuts a nice thread in here, and that looks good. Now this whole front section is done. We need to go ahead and rough and finish this back arc, and then put in our part off our part. So to do that, I want to add some extra lines again. It helps with the programming. So I want to extend this out so that it goes 200 thousandths past, which gives me plenty of clearance for my parting tool. And then I want to go ahead and go up past my stock again so that it makes sure that it roughs all the stock. So now my lines are ready. So I'm going to go to my turning tool pass. We'll go back down and we'll use another can cycle roughing. My chain that I'm going to select is going to be the first point and the end point. And you can see that it missed this line, so all we have to do is select that, and then it finishes the chain. We are not going to use the CNMG. It just doesn't have enough back clearance for any kind of this kind of geometry. So I'm going to switch over to the VNMG, which is going to be tool 3 in my library. So tool 3 is my VNMG tool. We're going to go ahead and rough this out. I'm going to change it to 30 thousandths depth of cut on the rough, and go into my plunge parameters, and I need to make sure that it's actually going to go down into this geometry. So my plunge cutting, I need to change it over to here, and that'll guarantee that it actually goes down into the geometry. So we're going to green check that. Green check that. There's my nice roughing tool path. Now we'll go ahead and create a finish tool path. Same tool. We're going to slow that feed rate a little down for the finish pass, 4,000 inches per rev. Now when I go to my can finish parameters, because I didn't select a chain, I have to select the roughing tool path that I want to mimic, and so which will be the second one. Green check that. Now there's my rough and finish tool path. So we'll turn those off and get ready to do our cutoff. So with my cutoff, I'm going to select the cutoff. I'm going to select my point, which is the end of the part. Using tool 4, my max spindle speed of 3,500. Now on my cutoff parameters, I'm going to go ahead and add a chamfer onto here, so that it'll put a little 20 thousandths chamfer on the end of the part when it cuts it off. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on chamfer, and we're going to go into the parameters. It's already set to a 45-degree chamfer. I'm going to go ahead and change it to a 20 thousandths width, so it'll put that 20 thousandths chamfer on there. Now, if you leave it like this, it's actually going to cut on an angle with that insert, and that's not always a very good situation for these inserts to cut into stock like that on an angle because of the way they're mounted in the tool. There's no room for that side pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a clearance cut first. And you can see in this clearance cut, it's going to have 100 thousandths of clearance beyond that chamfer that'll help with that side pressure and make it much better for the tool and the whole situation. So we're going to add the clearance cut, and you'll be able to see in the tool path that it's actually going to come down and make this clearance cut first, and then it's going to come back up and come on over and cut this angle here to put a little chamfer on the back side of our part before it finishes parting it off. So that looks good. It looks like I have all the tool paths made. Let's just do a quick verification. So as I push play, there should be facing, roughing, finishing of the front half. Now we're going to come in and put in the relief groove. Next tool is the threading tool. Going to take us 10 passes, the 3/8/16 thread. Then we're going to switch to the VNMG, rough out the back radius, finish the back radius, 200 thousandths past the part. Then I'm going to come in and cut my clearance, and then put in my chamfer on the back of the part and finish parting the part off. So at this point, you're ready to go to the machine. For those of you guys who have Mastercam that can post, you just select the G1 button. Green check, it's going to go ahead and post-process this with this part, so I'll save it as base pin 2. And then if you actually have a Mastercam key, it's going to pull open the Cam Expert and post out the part, and then you'll see your G code. And you'll see in our roughing cycles how it's using the G71 roughing cycle. That's a FANUC-based cycle. And then for our threading tools, the G76 threading can cycles. So for those of you who studied your G code on your lathe, this would all make sense to you. But yeah, so there's your program, and you're ready to go to the lathe and run. So thanks for watching this video. Go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm going to have more videos in the future. We're going to be getting into some 3D programming, some pretty cool stuff coming up. But yeah, thanks for watching.